Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Life. I'm Little J, and I'm glad you're still here because I've been gone for a while, as if you hadn't noticed. Actually, you probably didn't, but I'm still here. The glare in my glasses is still here. My office is still messy. Easter candy. And my mustache is longer than ever. I haven't just been neglecting my channel. A catastrophic, life-altering event happened to me in July of 2019 that led to litigation. And of course, COVID slowed that litigation to a crawl, and it's still ongoing, so I can't give you many details. I'll tell you this possibly unrelated piece of advice, and you can infer what you want from that. Don't drink and drive. Innocent people get hurt. Their lives and their families get completely upended. If you have a soul at all, you don't want that on your conscience. So what are we up to today? I decided sometime back to do some streaming of the racing games from my youth, just to see if there's an audience for it. Never understood the appeal of game streaming, but it's popular. It's a multi-million-dollar industry. Racing games are what I was into when I was younger. Don't think so much pole position and rad racer, but stuff from when gaming computers were really starting to come into their own and graphics accelerators were finally beginning to pack a punch. My favorite one was Insane because of all the different game modes. On my channel, you'll probably also see 4x4 Evolution, Pro Race Drivers, that was called Toka Race Driver if you're overseas. Speedbusters, that one had the silliest intro video ever. Midtown Madness, Driver, You're the Wheelman, maybe Dirt Track Racing, possibly a couple of newer titles like Blur and Sonic Racing Transformed. Those last two actually were ported to PC. The problem is that it's very difficult to get a lot of these games to run on modern hardware and Windows 10. Some won't run at all on a multi-monitor rig like my daily driver that I'm recording and editing this video with. That's okay. I have a boneyard full of antiquated hardware and a lot of new old stock from our store. So I threw together a rig that's about 10 or 15 years newer than most of the games I'll be playing. But I tested it out and things work pretty well. I can pipe its video card into this computer and it will stream just beautifully. My office is already cluttered, so I wanted to fit into this unused desk drawer. And that's what we're doing today. The computer's already built. We're basically just rebuilding it into a new case. I originally built it into a Silverstone PS07 case. I can't say enough good about that case. It used to hold Mary's PC. When she first picked it out off of that long shelf at Fry's. R.I.P. Screw you, COVID. Although they were already dying. And it's done a lot of jobs for us, our family, and our business since. It's a flexible, rugged case. It's easy to work in, as long as you don't mind working upside down. It's an upside down case. It's small enough to go almost anywhere on or around a desk, except this drawer. But it's still big enough inside to hold, liquid cooling hardware. It has 5¼ inch bays if you need them, if you still use optical drives. It just doesn't fit in this drawer. So, I have an Antec VSK 3000E case in my new old stock. That fits perfectly in the drawer. I'm taking it out of the drawer right now, as long as I don't have the feet on it. It should go well into this case. Of course, if it's going to fit in that drawer, I'm going to need, right angle cables. Now, I'm going to be using an EVGA GT640 GPU that used to be in my daily driver years and years ago. And I had to repaste it. The thermal paste on the GPU had just gotten dried out. It wasn't conducting well. and the fan was shot from years of continuously running. So it was loud as all get out. So I repasted the cooler using Conductonaut. I highly recommend this stuff for temperature intensive applications. It's particularly useful if you're into delighting, although delighting isn't as popular as it used to be. That was a couple of generations ago, where they were using really lousy TIM in Intel CPUs. But this is really good stuff, but it's liquid metal. So if you decide to give it a try, be very careful with it. The fan was so noisy that I got a Noctua 40 centimeter fan. There's our dead shroud and fan. As you can see, there's probably enough room here for 2 of these fans, but I just positioned this fan over the fins that overlap the GPU die itself. And this Noctua 40 millimeter fan was pretty cool in that it came with an adapter cable so that it could plug into the header on the GPU board. I thought I was going to have to run it off of the motherboard header, and the motherboard I'm using only had one header. And there were going to be other fans in the system, and I was worried about overloading the motherboard. Not an issue. It can run off of the card now. And since I was at it, when I ordered that 40 millimeter fan, I also ordered a couple of Noctua case fans for that case. That case has 2 80 millimeter fan openings. And so I ordered 2 80 millimeter Noctua fans because it's going to be in a desk drawer, trying to push heat away like Sisyphus trying to push a boulder up a hill. So I need all the cooling help I can get. These Noctua fans are great for having really, really good airflow, but they're also very quiet. That noisy GPU was infuriating. So now hopefully the computer will be very quiet down there in that drawer. I'm hoping that the OEM, the new old stock OEM CPU cooler that I used is also quiet. If it's not, I can get a Noctua cooler for it. They're not that expensive. Foundation for the rig, as you can see, is going to be this Asus M4N68T-M socket AM3 motherboard. This is an oldie, but it's going to get the job done well. I've got an Athlon CPU in it. I can't remember the exact SKU of that Athlon CPU. It doesn't matter at this point. It's 10 or so years old right now, and it's about 10 years newer than most of the games we'll be playing, so it's plenty. It's going to get the job done no matter what, whether it's a top shelf SKU or a cheap one. It's Athlon 2, so that was, one of AMD's flagship SKUs in its time. But that was in an era when AMD was the value per dollar king, but they were really, really notorious for promising big on performance but delivering small. And because of that, motherboard manufacturers tended to cheap out on these motherboards. As you can see, not a lot of phases in the VRM. There's no cooling on the VRM, but it's going to work for this cooler. This motherboard has what I need. It's got SATA 2 ports. I'd rather SATA 3, but when we're dealing with this age of hardware, I needed to run older software. I've got SATA 2 ports. I've got 2 DDR3 slots, and I've got a couple of 2 gigabyte DDR3 1600 slots of RAM in there. So 4 gigs of RAM. Look, heatsinks. I'm not so sure it needs it, but heatsinks, and it's got gigabit LAN. So this thing is, it's going to be an antiquated jalopy by today's standards. But, combine it with a modern SSD and these 4 gigs of RAM, which are really on the high side when you consider that these games come from an era when 512 gigs of RAM, 512 megabytes of RAM was on the high side, and 768 was a series. I mean, this computer, if a time-traveling gamer from 1998, 99, 2000, were to get their hands on the machine, they would think it is a ball-in computer. It will definitely run these games and an older operating system, no heartache at all. Got a SanDisk X400 256 gig SSD. This is also new old stock. You can still get this, and this is going to be a real boon to the machine. as far as load times for the games, getting the operating system to run better, things like that. And of course, I need to control the computer in between games somehow. And since it's going to be in a drawer, I've got a LitlJay K400 wireless. I think it's K400 Plus. Yeah, K400 Plus wireless keyboard and touchpad. So I won't be bungling around with two mice here. I don't have to worry about a KVM or anything because the output from the video card is being piped into a capture card on my computer. So I just want to have a separate keyboard and mouse that I can stick in the drawer with the computer, take it out when I need it, use it, put it back away. And for juice, I'm using an FSP 80 plus gold 700 watt non-modular power supply. This thing's out of production, but it's a really good power supply. I know I'm going to get stable, reliable, safe, consistent power out of it. This is twice as much power supply as the system's going to need, but you know, maybe when the system is at full tilt, it will get this power supply right into that sweet spot of the 80 plus certification to get me the most efficiency possible. It could happen. Now, this is not a how to build a computer video. There are thousands of those out there, and excluding The Verge, most of them are really good. I mean, even the ones that aren't strictly how to, but hey, look at this hardware I'm using, you can learn a lot by seeing them. I don't need to do a how to build a computer video. There's just too many of those. But I'm going to time-lapse the assembly of the computer for your viewing enjoyment, and I'll show you the setup when it's done. So, I've got my tweezers. I've got a table with a Texas flag on it. And I'm ready to screw with confidence. I'm sorry. I refuse to stop beating on that dead Verge horse. I'd let it die if Vox Media hadn't reacted so poorly to a little criticism. Here's a hint, you know, for you, because I'm sure no one at Vox Media is ever going to see this video. If your first move is to play the race card in reaction to criticism, particularly against a critic who is a minority himself, you might be on the wrong side of the argument. Just saying. Let's get to it. And there we have it. Please don't mind the mind-numbing clutter around the desk. We have connections here in the drawer for my LitlJay Momo racing wheel, which is actually out of production, but I found a new one in the box after some hunting. Don't mind this wire right here. That's just for the lavalier that I'm talking to you on. This other one that you probably can't see is charging my headset. As you can see, it fits beautifully. All of the wires are run under the desk in the drawer. It's out of the way. It can completely disappear. I can store my keyboard in there when I'm not using it. And this will be our first power on since it was rebuilt only moments ago. Okay, so let's power it up. Make sure we can get into the BIOS and see how the operating system does. One day I'm going to get on top of all this clutter. There we go. Beautiful. And everything looks good. Well, let's boot up the operating system. Detected the SSD just fine. I don't remember what operating system I used, but you see this boots up, logs in. That's nice. We have a mouse. I'm assuming we'll have a keyboard. Let's see. All right, see, I set this thing all up before when I first built it. This looks like Windows 10, but I don't think it is. Actually, it doesn't look like Windows 10. It looks like something that's been skinned to look like Windows 10. Let's just see what you are. Oops. It's Windows XP. It's just Windows XP that's been skinned to look like Windows 10. Oh, look, it's a 32-bit OS, which makes sense. I would have needed 32-bit OS for some of this software, so that's why we only have 4 gigs of RAM in it. 32-bit OS can make use of 3 gigs anyway. Has it been joined to the domain? Am I managing it and all that? It is. It is joined to the domain. So I can RDP into it and so forth. I wonder what it found. This is probably the keyboard and mouse here. Oh, the monitor. Well, the monitor is just a video capture card plugged into my computer. So for whatever reason, I felt compelled to skin Windows XP to look like Windows 10. Which, now that I'm looking at it, I really don't like it. All right. This looks to me like it's working. We'll do a little bit of streaming on these on my streaming channel. My streaming channel is going to be LitlJay the RetroRacer. Because this is Big Life with LitlJay, and I'm LitlJay. I'll have a link to it below. I will also have links to the parts in this machine that are still available and still sensible to use in a modern computer. This computer can be built really, really cheap. If you are looking for a chance to learn, to build, just to do some retro gaming like this, and you want some old hardware, you can get that motherboard, CPU, and RAM for like $50. The case is a really cheap case. You could tell by watching my my time-lapse assembly. Easy enough to work in. It's ugly, but the edges were rolled. Uh-oh, I have a whining dog in the background. It's time for the kids to go to school. That's the project. I'm pretty happy with how this worked out, how it's nice and hidden. It doesn't add to the clutter in my office. The wires are out of the way, and I get to use my awesome Momo steering wheel. So be sure to be checking LitlJay the RetroRacer on Twitch, Facebook, whatever you'd like. I'm going to be streaming on a few different services. I'm not sure what my streaming schedule is going to be, but there will be some updates on those channels. LitlJay the RetroRacer is on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. You'll have lots of places to keep up with it, and I'm going to try and set a schedule for the stream so I'm easy to keep up with if you want to watch. I don't know if anybody wants to watch, but if you do, it'll make me happy. Until then, I'm LitlJay. Life is a gift, so make it big.